What's up, everyone? This is Mitchell Mander here, and welcome to another review of Pokemon 2019. And if you saw my last video, you'll understand that this is probably going to be the last review of Pokemon 2019 that I do for a while, as the series has gone on indefinite hiatus, unfortunately. Anyways, I'm going to be covering episode 22, and I actually thought that this episode was good for the most part. It's not a great or amazing episode, but it was serviceable. It was pretty good for what we got. Go got actually pretty good development, and I'd say this is a sign that hopefully Go goes in the right direction in the future. So if you like this type of content, be sure to like and subscribe. Anyways, on to the review. We begin the episode with Ash and Go arriving in the Hoenn region, specifically Little Root Town, via train. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall there being a train station in the anime. Things might have changed since AG, but I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've watched AG, so can't really remember, but yeah, they arrive in the Hoenn region via train. Anyways, they're specifically here to do research on Beautifly, specifically when they migrate. And they have 4 days to knock out this research assignment from the South Rocky Labs. So Ash and Go set off to find some Wurmple, or Beautifly. Anyways, Go actually runs into one, and he tries to catch it because he's Go, and he wants to get another Wurmple because he had Cascoons before, and they all evolved into Dustox, unfortunately for Go. So, yeah, he wants to add another Wurmple to his collection, so hopefully it can evolve into a Beautifly. And before he could try and catch this Pokemon, Reboot interrupts him, doesn't help out, and just walks away. And the one thing you'll notice throughout this episode is that it kind of re-emphasizes the fact that Reboot has grown pretty cold and kind of rebellious against Go. It's been kind of building up since episode 17 when it evolved from Scorbunny. And it's had kind of a bit of an attitude. And Go just wonders why throughout the episode, or at least for the first part of the episode, and he's kind of realizing, yeah, he's been like this since it evolved. Just been kind of treating me like crap. Anyways, Ash and Go, as they're doing their research, they actually find what looks to be a wounded Zigzagoon. But it turns out it's playing a little bit of a prank, and it's trying to trick Ash and Go. So another Zigzagoon tries to steal Ash's bag. And Reboot steps in and prevents catastrophe from happening. And the two Zigzagoons take off running. You also see that they're with a Lombre. And Reboot actually notices this, but doesn't really say anything, kind of ignores Go, despite the fact that Go wants to acknowledge that, hey, thank you. Thanks for stopping that from happening. And yeah, Reboot's being kind of distant towards Go. So they pretty much head in for the night. And before they head to bed, Go actually manages to spot a Wurmple on the window. That's when he comes up with the bright idea that they need to look out for Cascoon, so that when it evolves and the Beautifly migrate to the south, they can spot it that way. So they try to look up Cascoon Nest. So in the middle of the night, Reboot actually wakes up and leaves the room and returns close to dawn, which Go actually wakes up and notices that Reboot was gone for a while and wonders where he was at, but Reboot doesn't answer him and just simply goes back to sleep. We go into day 2, and Ash and Go are in town, and Reboot wants some apples, which Go complies and gives him the apples. And when he wants one, Reboot basically refuses to share his apples with them, and Go has a bit of a meltdown here and wonders why Reboot just hates him and kind of screams at him. And the woman that was selling him the apples actually notes that Reboot is in his rebellious phase. Kind of ironic considering Go pretty much hasn't reached his own rebellious phase, but I digress. Anyways, they once again haven't caught the Cascoon, or they haven't evolved yet. I want to say they managed to pinpoint where they're at, but they're still waiting for the wind to pick up. So day 2 ends, and they were unsuccessful again. And Reboot ends up leaving in the middle of the night again, and this time Go actually trails him and finds out where he went. But he loses him, as unable to track him that night, so he heads back. Day 3 arrives, and finally, the Beautifly migration happens as the Cascoon all evolve, and Ash and Go witness the Beautifly fly off into the distance, or fly off to the ocean. And it's interesting here because Go needs to get a Beautifly, but he actually decides not to catch one here, which is pretty interesting. I think he was mesmerized by all the Beautifly that are basically flying off and migrating, which was actually pretty interesting. It's kind of surprising to see Go not take this opportunity to catch a Pokemon, but he didn't, which I think represented a little bit of growth for Go here. He realizes that he doesn't need to catch every Pokemon all the time, which is nice. However, we get into the main ending of this episode, in which they head in for the night, and this time they observe Raboot taking off, and Ash is in on it too. And throughout the episode too, while they're eating, Ash kind of notices what's going on with Go too, and kind of wondering, what's going on between the two. And Ash also emphasizes bond with Pikachu at one point in the episode, and Go realizes that he doesn't really have a bond with Raboot right now, and ends up confiding that to Ash about what's going on. And they manage to see that Raboot took off again in the night, so Ash and Go trail Raboot, and they find out where he's been. Turns out he's basically dancing with the two Zigzagoon that tried to steal Ash's backpack and the Lombre that was with them. So they're basically breakdancing, which is different. And that's kind of when they realize that it kind of reminds them of the Nickets that Scorbunny took care of back in episode 4. Is basically the leader of that group, and they see that pretty much Raboot seemingly has become the new leader for them and is basically helping them out, which was a nice tie-in to episode 4. However, they're interrupted by a pack of Loudred, which scream and shout, and they basically have a dance-off for territory, which is pretty interesting, but they're super loud. So Ash and Go end up helping out, and despite being surprised, Raboot actually accepts their invitation, and they help out, and they manage to defeat the Loudred in a dance-off. They literally have a dance-off for territory. That's something different for Pokemon. We then arrive at day 4, the day that Ash and Go depart Hoenn and head back home. As they're heading to the train station, Ash notices that Go doesn't have Raboot with him. And that's when he reveals that he basically left Raboot. He went and visited him, but he never said goodbye. As he acknowledges that, hey, this would be better for Raboot. He's been kind of bored lately, and we've been having problems, and we were having issues with one another. And I haven't seen him have this much fun in a long time. He was smiling the entire time while he was doing the dance-off and stuff, and helping out the Loudred and the Zigzagoon. It kind of reminded Ash and Go once again that he's like the new leader, kind of tying back to episode 4. And maybe he'd be better off staying with them and raising them. So instead of saying goodbye, Go just literally leaves Raboot without saying anything, and Ash even calls him out for this. But the one thing that is pretty interesting, and even though Go made a very big mistake here, he actually acknowledges his own mistakes here, finally. This is what I've been wanting. He realizes that the reason why Raboot is so stubborn and rebellious and doesn't seem to respect Go is really all his fault. And I like how it comes full circle here, because you get to see Go finally developing and finally realizing his own stubbornness and how he caused this way back in episode 17. So I like the growth here. But anyways, Go, as he's getting on the train, realizes that, yeah, Ash called him out. He didn't say goodbye to Raboot, and I actually didn't talk to him to, explain the situation to him. And before Go can get off the train and run to get Raboot, it's too late. The train takes off, and he desperately runs to the back of the train to try and get off, but unfortunately it's too late. Lucky for Go, Scorbunny, Raboot actually is on the train, and to comfort Go, after crying and thinking that, he was separated from Raboot forever, he ends up giving Go one of his apples as a sign of, friendship and acknowledgement. He gave the other apples to the other Pokemon, but he's giving it to Go as a sign of appreciation, probably for helping him out tonight. And Go is super delighted and hugs Scorbunny. I keep calling him Scorbunny. Raboot, and Raboot is obviously a little annoyed, but he is smiling as he was giving him the apple. So you see a little bit of development and appreciation with Raboot. So the episode concludes with Go and Raboot growing closer to one another. Now I just want to say that this episode is exactly what I want when Ash and Go are going to the regions. I want actual development going on in these episodes. I want the characters to grow. I want them to experience new things as they're going back to the regions, like Ash is going back to these regions and learning stuff through research. And the interesting thing, though, with this episode is that the actual research in this episode was essentially a backseat to Go and Scorbunny. I keep calling Raboot Scorbunny. Raboot's development. And you get to see, them grow, and you see Go throughout this episode. He's realizing, him and Reboot have grown apart over the last couple of episodes, or last couple of days, I could say, or weeks, or however much time has passed. He realizes, their bond is just not strong as it was when Reboot was a Score Bunny. And you get to see it emphasized in this episode with Ash and Pikachu. And he acknowledges that, hey, those two are, they have a pretty strong bond still. And me and Reboot, we just don't have it. I don't understand why he hates me so much. I like the fact that it comes full circle. Go sees that Reboot is taking care of these Pokemon that are like the Nickets back in episode 4. And I actually want to say that I really like that callback. I wasn't a big fan of that episode, but this whole scene in this episode adds back to that episode and strengthens it a bit. We get to see that Reboot likes to be kind of a leader and likes to help out other Pokemon. He may be stubborn towards Go, but he is a helpful Pokemon, and he'll step up when he needs to. And I like that. I like how the episode hammered that home. And I also like the fact that Go acknowledges that it's pretty much his fault that Reboot's the way he is towards him. And I love it. It's basically coming around. Go's realizing his mistakes. He's trying to make up for it. And I like the little bit of growth that Go got in this episode. It was good. Also, can we appreciate the fact that Go didn't catch a Pokemon in this episode? I mean, I've been pretty critical of how he's been catching his Pokemon in this series, but I like the fact that it was de-emphasized in this episode and it wasn't a focus at all. Sure, he came to Hoenn, and one of the things he wanted to do when he got to Hoenn was further his goal, catch a Wurmple, and hopefully it evolves into a Beautifly. But that didn't happen. Reboot was the one that kind of threw that in the can. But then later on in the episode, he had an opportunity to not only catch a Cascoon that would evolve into Beautifly, but catch a Beautifly itself. And he didn't do that, which I thought was pretty interesting. I know he was probably more mesmerized by the fact that the Beautifly were all migrating, but I see this as a little sign of development here, as he had every opportunity to catch it, and he could have done it. If this was Go, even just a couple of episodes ago, he would not have hesitated to catch either the Cascoon or Beautifly. But he didn't do it, which I thought was pretty interesting. It shows a little bit of growth for Go. It shows that he's not going to be just catching Pokemon all the time. And hopefully this is something that's reinforced in the future and we don't see this in future episodes. I mean, I don't mind him catching a bunch of Pokemon, just make it a little bit more meaningful. Just saying. That all being said, in my personal opinion, I feel like this episode should have been a mini arc. Like I mentioned in my discussion videos, I feel like this should have been like a 2, possibly a 3 episode mini arc where Reboot and Go are having their issues, and maybe Reboot leaves for a little bit and then comes back. Kind of like in the way this episode where Reboot was taken off and then coming back later. It could have been expanded into a second episode. Like the first episode could have focused mainly on the migration stuff, and this was in the background. And towards the end of the episode, Ash and Go spot Reboot hanging out at this place. I kind of feel like maybe they could have gone that route, as I felt like even though it was nice and it was good development and it was nice to see what Reboot was up to and kind of how he's like when he's not around Go. I think that was pretty nice, but I feel like it could have been expanded upon a little bit more and been a second episode personally. That's just me though. That being said, it's probably a good thing that it wasn't a 2-parter considering the series is on hiatus now and we wouldn't have gotten a conclusion to this episode for a little while, or what's going on in this episode for a little while. So maybe it was for the best that this was condensed down to 1 episode. Anyways, guys, that's all I got for this review. So overall, this was actually a pretty good episode. I'm going to rate this episode an 8 out of 10. So, good episode, great episode overall. Good development for Reboot and Go, and hopefully they develop further in the future when Reboot evolves into Cinderace. Whenever that happens. Anyways, guys, that's all I got for this review. Post your thoughts in the comment section down below. Be sure to like and subscribe. I will talk to you guys later.